Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so glad to have you here. New Jersey's race for governor continues to heat up with more candidates throwing their name into the ring, even though the election isn't until November 2025. John Wisniewski, a former New Jersey legislator who was also a candidate for governor, is here to break it down and to talk about what's ahead for the candidates. First, though, Ocean County Assemblyman Paul Kanitra recently returned from a trip to the Texas-Mexico border. It was part of a research report on illegal immigration crisis and the impact here in New Jersey. Assemblyman joins us now. Welcome to the show. It's so good to see you.
Hey, Laura, it's great to see you.
And let's talk a little bit about you are releasing a 15-page document to the public, and you're calling it one of the most wide-ranging studies on the impact of illegal immigration here in New Jersey. What did you find?
I think it's even grown from 15 pages since we started working on it. It's been a 2-month-long process already, and as we were getting to the final stages of it, we thought that it was important to really dig in firsthand and see the situation up close, talk with everybody who was affected by it and impacting it down at the border, and then more importantly, to see how our policies here in New Jersey possibly were affecting things at the border and vice versa as well. So it was an educational trip. There were a lot of scholars. We talked to judges, we talked to sheriffs, we talked to Border Patrol, Texas DPS, the entire spectrum of everybody involved with it, and we've found out quite a bit, and we're excited to announce our findings here.
Well, I would like to talk about some of the findings, but I think first question, some people might say, well, why is a legislator from New Jersey going to the border? What is the purpose of that? So what is your answer?
So we're in budget season right now, as you know. We have about a $56 billion budget in New Jersey, and our report has found that about $7.3 billion of that $56 billion budget goes directly or indirectly to illegal immigrants and the variety of services and benefits that we provide as a state. So with that kind of seismic impact, where we're talking about $2,100 per household, and we're spending about $8,000 per illegal immigrant in the U.S., we thought that there was nothing more important than figuring out the New Jersey connection to that. And while we were down there, for instance, when I was riding with Lieutenant Olivares, who is the spokesperson for the Texas DPS along the entire border situation, he directly told us that sanctuary state policies like those that we have in New Jersey are actually incentivizing individuals from Central America, South America, and across the ocean, places like the Ivory Coast and Russia and China, to actually come to the U.S. and specifically then seek out New Jersey and come here. And to make that even more closer hitting to home here, my flight back from the border, when I thought my trip was over from San Antonio back to Newark Airport, was half filled with illegal immigrants who all had wristbands on from the various NGOs and charities that help assist and get government money to help assist. And then they scattered into the state with various different people picking them up when we saw them on the curb after us. So I think it is as impactful to New Jersey and vice versa as you could imagine.
So when you were there on your trip, how do you strike also what comes into your mind when it comes to people who are legitimately trying to come to this country for a better life, being lumped in with those who are not taking the right steps, right? You know, people might take issue by saying illegal immigrants as opposed to undocumented workers. So, you know, how do you process that, and how do you process that?
Of course, and I think a lot of times in the debate, people are talking about asylum, right? That's a term that's spoken about a lot, and people being persecuted in their home countries. One of the things that we found, and that we'll be discussing in the report, is that only 7% of illegal immigrants that come here actually request asylum. So those numbers are staggering, because that means that 93% of the illegal immigrants that are coming here are actually just coming for various other reasons. And more important than that, there's two categories of illegal immigrants. You have what they're calling at the border, they call give-ups. They're people that cross the border and actually seek out Texas Border Patrol because they're the ones that are going to process them quickly and then push them into the United States. But then they have runners. And the runners are varying degrees of criminals who are running because they don't want to get caught. And they call them gotaways because a vast majority of them are never caught and just wind up in the country. Now, when you're talking about immigration, this state, this country was built on immigrants. My family is a family of immigrants. I'm sure your family was a family of immigrants, just like everybody across the Garden State. And we need to certainly look at how do we clean up that process? How do we make the process for legal immigration, a little easier so people aren't waiting 10 years to do the right thing here? Because the illegal immigrants, quite frankly, are getting exploited at every step along the way. When they're starting, let's just say in South America, it's cartels that are moving them along the way. They're having to trudge through the Darien Gap in Panama, which is one of the most horrific places on the planet in terms of natural disasters, natural dangers. People are dying there all the time. Then they cross a desert in Mexico. They have to pay the cartels all this funding to get across what the UN calls the most deadly border in the world. The amount of people that die crossing the Rio Grande, that drown, kids separated from families, the amount of kids that are abused along the way, and women that are sexually abused and have all other kinds of horrors forced on them, it really touches your heart, but we need to find a way to do it legally.
When you hear these stories, and you can't help but hear these stories if you're a consumer of news, and depending on what channel you watch, it's going to paint a little bit different image, but actually being there, can you describe what it was like, what people are getting right, what people might be getting wrong, what the reality is of what you witnessed?
Of course, and objectively, it pulls on both sides of the spectrum, all sides of emotion. The coordination from the government is something that you don't really expect. For instance, there's a CBP app that if you want to enter the country illegally, you literally can sign up like DoorDash or Uber Eats, schedule a time that you want to enter illegally, and you can just show up at an airport and do that. And 350,000 people do that every year. And then there are the people who obviously can't afford to fly in and can't do things that way. And I watched them cross the river, and I watched the undercurrent take some people a lot further down than they thought it would. And I watched people challenge the barbed wire fencing. And that it's a sad situation. But the reality of the numbers and how people are incentivized is also staggering. And the amount that we're actually not capturing in terms of our estimates of who's here and how they're coming is equally staggering, and it's not sustainable. And that's part of the pragmatic approach to the report and part of the academic approach as well.
Well, I mean, one thing going down there, witnessing it, now you've put together a report, it has data in it, so how are you getting access to some of the information that's included in the data in your report?
We've utilized a variety of different sources. We have nonprofit sources that we've been utilizing. We have state data sources and federal data sources as well. And then, we broke it down into different areas. So we looked in terms of cost, we were looking at utilities, we were looking at housing, we were looking at education, food, even legal costs. And one of the big ironies of this is New Jersey residents are paying $15 million a year in legal costs, and the legal costs are so that we can fight the ability to deport the illegal immigrants here. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy there that legal residents are actually paying to defend illegal residents in their quest to stay in the state and in the country.
And it seems to be there's a formula that people follow. It's not that they're just showing up. There's an app for that, and there is a pretty step 1, step 2, step 3. Here you are.
And it's very coordinated, and it's scary to hear at the border some of the stories because One of the things, obviously, is the transportation of illegals. Once the coyotes get them, and the coyotes are the cartel's illegal smugglers, once they get them across the border, they have to be picked up. And one of the interesting things that we heard is a lot of people from New Jersey are actually driving to the border to pick them up. And you were talking about the coordination. They use encrypted WhatsApp groups. They use Craigslist ads. They use all kinds of app and social media techniques, Facebook messages, whatever, to recruit people to come to the border, a lot of times not even knowing what they're doing. They give them coordinates in a field to go pick up a group of people, and they tell them if you deliver them to X address, you're going to get $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a head. So that's part of this component that isn't being talked about as well.
So based upon all this information that you're gathering and still looking through, what types of action do you think the state of New Jersey needs to take based upon what you found thus far?
So the biggest thing, and I mentioned it earlier, illegal immigrants are being exploited, and they've been exploited for decades. And honestly, if you go back far enough, it was Republicans, Democrats, it was all parties that were exploiting them for cheap labor. And it's kind of anti-capitalist if you really think about it, because you have people in the U.S. that might not want to do the work at a certain rate. So the solution is to go and get illegal immigrants and exploit them because they're willing to do the labor at that rate. That's a difficult thing. And what we found is a lot of them, once they're here, actually regret coming here because they are, in some regards, living in the shadows a little bit. The quality of life isn't what they exactly imagine. So one of the bills that we're going to be introducing as a result of this report is going to be called the Unifying Families Act. And we're going to give the opportunity for illegals here in the state to go back to their home country. Again, as I mentioned earlier, at $8,000 per illegal in the state of New Jersey, we could easily afford to take that money out of the benefits that we're providing them, $500, even $1,000 for airfare. We'll have them sign a pledge saying that they're not going to be returning to the state of New Jersey. And then they'll be able to go back and be reunited in their home country with their families that are over there as well. And then there's a massive savings to the taxpayers. Obviously, there's other recommendations in the report, like complying with federal immigrations and customs enforcement authorities, and there's some components about reducing the benefits that we're spending on this overall as well to incentivize those who are here illegally to go back willingly on their own.
And just final thoughts, what type of support are you getting from your colleagues in the legislature?
My colleagues on my side of the aisle, almost universal. I think we see a bloated budget. I don't think anybody truly understood the financial impact of the illegal immigration crisis in New Jersey. And as we're starting to pass around the numbers from the report, people are really waking up and realizing that we have to do something. And again, our hope is that we stop the exploitation of these individuals. I think that is a bipartisan wish right there. And hopefully by releasing the report and everybody seeing the data associated with that and the objectiveness of the data that's in there, that it'll shine a spotlight on this and maybe we'll find some real solutions.
Assemblyman, thank you so much for taking the time to share with us a little bit about your trip and what you found and what you plan on doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Summers in New Jersey were made to wow you. From sun and wows to fun and wows and every wow in between. So come see what your wow's gonna be. New Jersey. It's one wow after another, after another, after another. You get it. Find your wow at visitnj.org. New Jersey. Little state, lot of wow.
We are going to jump right into New Jersey's race for governor. Joining me now is former New Jersey legislator John Wisniewski. He himself ran for governor on the Democratic side back in 2017. Assemblyman, it is good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Laura, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh, always a pleasure. All right, so let's start with the Republican side, the Republican candidates. Jack Ciattarelli recently announced he's running. Now, he was the Republican nominee last time around, narrowly losing to Governor Murphy. So this is going to be his third time running. What do you think? Is this a negative or positive for the voters, for himself? What do you think?
Well, it depends on what side of the equation you're on, right? So the Ciattarelli campaign, I'm sure, will talk about, the closeness of the last election and, all he needs is one more shot. And of course, John Bramnick, who is his opponent in the Republican primary, has essentially characterized that 3 tries is just one too many and that it's time to move in a new direction. And so for the first time in the races that Jack has been in primaries, he has a formidable opponent in Senator Bramnick. He hasn't really faced that both in the first outing in 2017 and then again in the most recent one. So we'll have to see how the Republican primary shapes up. And unknown in that right now is whether or not the abolishment of the party line on the Democratic side will become a reality on the Republican side in 2025.
Yeah, well, let me ask you, brought up Senator John Bramnick, the other Republican in the race, seems to be running more as anti-Trump and all about getting along with both sides of the aisle. So when it comes to a primary, do you think that this is a good or bad thing for John Bramnick? Because in order to get those primary voters, sometimes you need to run further to the right, or on the Democratic side, run further to the left. So what are your thoughts when it comes to John Bramnick and having this real centrist attitude?
Sure. Well, I think being a centrist plays well in both parties. If the message that you're delivering is, look, I can work on both sides of the aisle and I can get things done, there's nobody that's really opposed to that kind of philosophy. However, when you couple that with the anti-Trump message, he's certainly going to alienate that block of Republican primary voters who are, all in on Donald Trump and do not want to hear any criticism of their idol. And so it remains to be seen whether or not he can get enough votes in a primary by courting the centrist part of the Republican electorate. Certainly, on a Democratic side, it's really the hardcore members of the Democratic Party that come out in every primary. And I would, venture that that's also true on the Republican side, the hardcore adherents. And I believe that those hardcore adherents are a majority Trump supporters.
Well, and then we have another unknown into the race, and that's Bill Spadea. He's a morning show host from New Jersey 101.5. He's really been out there, and he's tends to skew more conservative. Don't know if he is for sure going to enter that race, but there is certainly a lot of talk and assumptions that he will.
Yeah, it's interesting because depending on what happens with the ballot, right? Imagine a world in which there are no Republican county lines. And so everybody is just lumped together in one block. And you've got Jack Ciattarelli, who I assume will follow what he did last time and be a Trump adherent, but not really a visceral one. John Bramnick, a Trump opponent. And then here comes Bill Spadea. Does Bill Spadea split the difference and become the Republican nominee?
Right. Well, and then when it comes down, let's talk a little bit about, you're mentioning those lines. Currently in the race for U.S. Senate, judge has said that the lines are unconstitutional. So again, our audience understands it's where you are placed in the ballot, and those ballots are being redrawn. So you don't have one candidate that has a favorable place on the ballot as opposed to another one. So can you talk a little bit about the Republicans? And at this point, within the Republican Party, how do you think that's going to play out? Because, you have somebody, we'll deal with the two candidates now, Jack Ciattarelli, John Bramnick. They have a lot of the same supporters. So what in the world is going to happen, when it comes to getting that county support, that support at the county level?
So in a version of the future in which Republicans can continue to have a party organization line, but Democrats can't, and I can't really see that happening, those who will get the majority of party line support would likely to have the advantage. So I don't see Bill Spadea getting party line support in many counties. And so if that's the world, then it's either going to be Bramnick or Chitterelli who get the majority support of county organizations and therefore walk to victory. But in a open primary where in each county a different person may be at the top of the ballot, a personality like Bill Spadea, who's on the air every day, is certainly going to have that built-in name recognition that might propel him, regardless of what his policies are, that might propel him to victory. John Bramnick, and we find this out, legislators believe they are well known, but for most people in the state, if your name recognition statewide gets above 10%, that's really huge. And you need to be well above that in order to win a statewide primary.
Right, and because we are sandwiched in between New York and the Philadelphia media markets, getting that name recognition, that money you need to get your name out there is certainly challenging. Again, Jack Chitterelli, this is the third time he's going, so his name recognition is probably going to be better than John Bramnick. People in the state, though, they know them both equally, but Bill Spadea, man, people know him. And he is connecting with voters taking those phone calls on his radio show.
It's interesting that he's still doing that program and toying with the idea of being a gubernatorial candidate. It almost seems like an in-kind contribution to his campaign, which is a whole another issue. But if you were to look at just what we know without looking at any real polling data, it would seem that Bill Spadea probably has the highest name recognition of all three candidates, followed by Chitterelli and then Bramnick. And so if it was a race just based on name recognition, you would see where it's going. But media markets are going to play a big part. Philadelphia and New York media markets are very expensive. The candidate who can raise enough money to become very ample on those airwaves is going to have another advantage.
Yeah, and as far as when it comes to issues, John Bramnick, Jack Chitterelli, probably pretty similar on where they stand on the issues, I would imagine. So it is going to be interesting to see which one is able to take the lead here.
Yeah, I mean, the most conservative will likely be Bill Spadea. I mean, he will be as far right as Donald Trump on many issues. I think Chitterelli will fall somewhere in the middle, and I think Bramnick will be the least far right of all, if that's an actual thing, the least far right of all three.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's give a little time for the Democrats. At this point, we've got former State Senator Steve Sweeney, who was the Senate President. He's running. We've got Jersey City Mayor Steve Fulop. What are you seeing on the Democratic side?
And Newark Mayor Ross Baraka.
Yes, Ross Baraka. Yes. Yep.
Well, see, it's interesting because I think all three of these gentlemen have gotten into the race long before it was understood that there would not be county lines. And so you could see former Senator Sweeney banking on having the party line in 7 South Jersey counties. That's not a guarantee now. And if he doesn't come out of those 7 South Jersey counties with a very robust number by virtue of having that line, then the ability to break through in North Jersey becomes a lot more suspect. For Steve Fulop, the reverse is true, right? He was counting on a Hudson County line and perhaps maybe creeping into getting the Bergen or maybe the Essex line. I think Ross Baraka had the same hopes. That's all off the table now. You could envision a scenario. Let's just say it's those three candidates, and there's a drawing in Hudson County where one person's first, one person's second. What if Ross Baraka becomes place number 1 on the ballot in Hudson County? What if Steve Sweeney gets place number 1 on the Essex County ballot? I mean, that certainly scrambles a lot of the calculations that have gone thus far into everybody's campaign.
Yeah, so how does the elimination of the county lines impact how these campaigns are running, right? Because you did rely on going to each county, campaigning, stating your case. But again, that's to party insiders. Is this a positive or negative thing? For voters, right? Because this is going to have the candidates really having to, I would imagine, shift their way of connecting with the voters and ensuring that their message is being heard and people know who they are, because if you don't have that preferential place on the ballot that says, yes, this county has said this is the person that we support and you should support too. How does that impact? And you know, also with the way they have to approach their fundraising.
Yeah, messaging is going to become a lot more important. In the prior iteration of how this thing worked, those who got the county line were the presumptive winners of that county in a primary election. And so messaging was important, but not as important as that predominant position on the ballot. I think in the briefs that were submitted in the litigation on this issue said that line candidates had on average a 25 or 30% advantage over their opponents. So if that's taken away, now it's going to be about appealing to individual voters with the message that resonates with those voters. And so there's going to be a shift in strategy where candidates are going to actually have to think about, how do I connect and get as many of those Democratic primary voters to come out and support me? Yeah. They'll still have to pay attention to the county parties because they will still have money and organizational strength to get people on the street. But the primary focus, in my opinion, is going to now shift from all about county parties to, in part, maybe a significant portion just being about, how do I get that block of Democrats who I know will come out to vote for me, given my ballot position, right? If you get position 1 in Essex County, you're in a much better position than if you're in position 3 or 5, or, you know, depending on what number of candidates there are.
Well, there's never a dull moment in New Jersey politics. John Wisniewski, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you. My pleasure.
And that will do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.
New Jersey, we've got more summer wows under the sun than anyone. So come see what your wow's gonna be in the little state of New Jersey, where it's one wow after another, after another, after another. You get it. Find your wow at visitnj.org. New Jersey, little state, lotta